3 months after being convicted on prostitution charges, Sean Diddy Combs will be sentenced by a federal judge.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Tonight, we turn to the latest developments in the legal saga of Sean Diddy Combs, once one of the most influential figures in music and entertainment.
Hour and a half this morning, and attorneys for Sean Combs essentially argued that after he was acquitted of sex trafficking in the case of Cassie Ventura and Jane, that the 2 counts that he was convicted on, transportation to engage in prostitution, really doesn't make any sense.
Combs is now facing the very real possibility of spending more than a decade in prison. His conviction has been upheld in federal court, and his legal options have narrowed dramatically as his sentencing date approaches. Just this week, U.S. District Judge Arun Subramanian in Manhattan denied Combs' motions for both acquittal and a new trial. In his ruling, the judge stated that prosecutors had provided overwhelming evidence during the July proceedings to support the guilty verdict,
Arguing prostitution doesn't include commercial voyeurism, that Combs should not be viewed any differently than a producer of amateur porn, and because the encounters were taped, he's protected by the First Amendment. But
the decision makes clear that the court is standing firmly behind the jury's findings, bringing an end to any chance of the conviction being vacated before sentencing. Back in July, after weeks of testimony and heated courtroom exchanges, a jury delivered a mixed verdict in Combs' case. He was acquitted of the most serious allegations of racketeering and sex trafficking, charges that carried the.
Now, after the hearing ended today, Combs spent a little time in the courtroom with his children, his family members, 2 rows of them. He said that he's getting closer. This is what he told them, that he's getting closer and closer to getting home very soon. He told his family he loved them. He even told one of his daughters that he likes her new hairstyle. So he was in good spirits after seeing his family. But again, this decision pending, and we don't know when it's going to come down, but everyone's waiting to find out what.
It prohibits transporting individuals across state lines for prostitution or unlawful sexual activity. These convictions stemmed from what prosecutors described as orchestrated encounters, often referred to as freak-offs, that Combs arranged and paid for, sometimes recording the events and using his influence to maintain control over the women involved. Prosecutors have painted a disturbing picture of how these events unfolded. They allege that Combs used wealth, drugs, and intimidation to manipulate women into sexual encounters, and that he transported individuals across state lines in clear violation of federal law. Evidence presented at trial included testimony from former partners, associates, and law enforcement, as well as video and electronic records. The defense team, for its part, has insisted that the government's portrayal of Combs is exaggerated and misleading. They argue that the encounters were consensual, that Combs never forced anyone to participate, and that the government is unfairly criminalizing behavior that was, in their words, closer to amateur pornography than to trafficking. They also stressed his accomplishments as a businessman, philanthropist, and cultural icon, asking the court to weigh his contributions against the charges. Judge Subramanian, however, was not convinced by these arguments. In rejecting the defense motions this week, he wrote that the jury had ample grounds for its decision and that the government proved its case many times over. This means the convictions stand exactly as they were delivered, closing the door on any hope Combs may have had of walking free before sentencing. Now, attention turns to October 3rd, when Judge Subramanian will sentence the 55-year-old mogul. Federal prosecutors are calling for a sentence of 11 years and 3 months, 135 months in prison, pointing to what they describe as a long-standing pattern of abuse, coercion, and violence. In a sentencing memo filed with the court, prosecutors said Combs has shown no remorse and continues to downplay his role in harming others. They argue that a substantial sentence is necessary both to reflect the seriousness of his crimes and to send a message that fame and fortune do not place anyone above the law. The defense, meanwhile, is seeking a much lighter penalty, no more than 14 months behind bars. They argue that Combs has already spent considerable time in detention, that he poses no future risk, and that he is taking steps toward rehabilitation. His attorneys have highlighted his work with fellow inmates while in custody at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, where he launched a business education program called Free Game with Diddy. They say this demonstrates his commitment to using his experience to benefit others, even under difficult circumstances. But perhaps the most powerful voices in the run-up to sentencing come from Combs' accusers. Cassandra Cassie Ventura, a longtime partner of Combs and a central figure in the case, submitted a victim impact statement to the court. In it, she described years of abuse, manipulation, and violence, and said she continues to live in fear of what might happen if Combs were to regain his freedom. Her words were blunt and emotional, calling on the judge to deliver a sentence that reflects the full weight of the harm caused. Other women who testified echoed similar accounts, describing coercion, intimidation, and trauma that stretched across years. Prosecutors have cited these testimonies as critical evidence of Combs' conduct, arguing that they demonstrate a clear pattern of behavior inconsistent with the defense's claims of consensual encounters. Outside the courtroom, reaction to the case has been divided. Some of Combs' longtime fans and industry colleagues continue to defend him, pointing to his decades of influence in music, fashion, and business. They argue that the charges distort his legacy and that his philanthropic efforts and mentorship of young artists should not be ignored. But many others say the trial has confirmed suspicions that have circulated for years, that behind the carefully crafted image of success and ambition was a man who abused power and left a trail of harm. On social media, discussions about the case have ignited broader debates about accountability in the entertainment industry, with comparisons to other high-profile figures who have faced similar accusations in recent years. For now, Sean Diddy Combs remains in custody. His earlier request for bail was denied, with Judge Subramanian citing both the seriousness of the offenses and concerns about flight risk. Combs will remain behind bars at the Metropolitan Detention Center until sentencing. The October 3rd hearing will be a decisive moment, not just for Combs, but for the wider conversation about celebrity, accountability, and justice. If prosecutors succeed, the once untouchable mogul could be looking at more than a decade behind bars. If the defense prevails, he could serve just a little over a year. Either way, his conviction is secure. His legal challenges have been exhausted at the trial court level, and his reputation has been permanently reshaped by this case. In the words of prosecutors, this is not just about one man, it is about ensuring that power and fame cannot shield someone from responsibility. And in the words of his defense team, it is about not allowing the government to overreach or to redefine consensual relationships as criminal conduct. The stakes are enormous, and the outcome will reverberate across the music industry, the legal community, and popular culture at large. With the conviction upheld and sentencing now just days away, Sean Diddy Combs faces the harsh reality of a future defined not by his chart-topping hits or business ventures, but by a federal prison sentence. We will continue to follow this story closely and bring you the latest updates as the sentencing approaches. For now, Sean Diddy Combs' conviction holds, and the countdown to judgment has begun.